So we've talked before briefly about the Wands of Mortis and their role in the galaxy, and we are going to touch on them again in another video, but in this video we're going to be looking at Abeloth and how she fits into that frame, you know, that sort of Mortis frame, her role in the galaxy, what she is, what she represents, how she functions, and all of that good stuff. So the Killiks, who are basically a race that worked with the Celestials ages ago when the Celestials were in the galaxy. The Celestials, of course, being the species that the Wands belong to. So the Killiks served the Celestials, and in the Killik record that Luke's team studies on Abeloth's planet, Abeloth is explicitly contrasted with the Wands. The reliefs show her aging and being changed by the font and the pool, the font of power and the pool of knowledge, while the son and the daughter are unaffected. Now, in Apocalypse, Techley says, "I am beginning to believe Abeloth can't be a Celestial. She grew old when they did not, and she was being changed by the Force, by the font and the pool, when the son and daughter were unaffected by the font and the pool. It's Abeloth's nature to seek what is beyond her grasp. That is why she's the bringer of chaos." So she's not a Celestial, right, but she wanted to fit in with the Celestials. She wanted to be like them. She wanted to be loved. So she drank from the font and the pool. She went beyond what she was meant to. And this is why she's all twisted and distorted and full of tentacles and not in proper physical form. She was immortal, she wasn't a Celestial. So she went beyond what she was meant to have. It's like chasing a mirage, only she's managed to reach that. Which, you know, that's impossible, right? But she's done it through exploiting the font and the pool of knowledge. She's gone outside of what's possible within the Force to achieve that. She's reaching for more. She's reached for more than she can handle, basically. More than she was meant to have. They say it's Abeloth's nature to seek what is beyond her grasp. That's why she's the bringer of chaos. So the same sort of thing shows with the father blocking Abeloth as she reaches for the son and daughter, establishing her as a counter to the father's function as the keeper of balance. Techley summarises the Killik view that they associate her with strife and violence. That's what they say, they associate her with strife and violence, not as a goal in itself, but as the phase that destroys the old order and makes room for the new one, if that makes sense. So when she's released, she destroys the old order and makes room for a new one. So what has to happen to release Abeloth? So think of the Force like a riverbed, and you've got the water in the riverbed, and you've got, of course, the riverbank, you've got the walls. And you know, the river's pretty wide and it branches off in loads of different directions. Now, a mere change of destination inside the flow of that river doesn't free Abeloth. It's not anything to do with inside of the river. It's changing the current, changing the river itself, the riverbed, the river walls, changing the river itself that frees Abeloth. And, you know, not following your destiny turns to the dark side. Those are all just possible destinations within that river still. And Tharut says they've only ridden it to one of many destinations, obviously within the river, but if they wish to go where the current cannot carry them, the current must be turned. And then Raynar carries on and says, and to do that, the river itself must be altered. And then Tharut says the Force guides the current. It's impossible to turn the current without also changing the Force. When the Celestial's power is usurped, the bringer of chaos comes. So in order to unleash Abeloth, you need to change the structure of the river itself to change the current. And to do that, the Celestial's power must be usurped. And that does not mean usurped in the sense that the mortals are exploiting the Wands' power in the Clone Wars. It doesn't mean exploit their power and usurp their power in that sense. What it means is usurp the shape of their power. So if you picture the Wands, the Celestials, as the river itself, So the daughter is one river that goes down one side, for example, and the son goes down the other side. They are the river, the shape of the river. And those mortals are exploiting all of the water that flows down that river. But at the same time, they don't embody the shape of the river. It's that shape of the river, that very concept of what that is, that needs to be usurped through some celestial nodes, which is the font of power and the pool of knowledge. So their power needs to be usurped in that sense in order to unleash Abeloth. And that was Darth Kaidos. Darth Kaidos altered the current, changed the force, which set Abeloth free. And Luke later tells Jason, he tells Jason's apparition at the Lake of Apparitions, Beyond Shadows. And I'll get more into this in another video, Jason's side of things, but essentially he did that when he tried to change the future to avoid the vision of Alana sitting on the Dark Throne with the Dark Man, which of course is Jason's vision of Darth Krayt. So in order to stop Alana being the apprentice of Darth Krayt, which was the only inevitable outcomes in the river, the river was only going downstream towards that outcome, Jason has changed the current and stopped that from happening, and in doing so has released Abeloth. So the book lays out sort of a origins and a deviation, and so an aged Abeloth drinks from the font of power, then a renewed Abeloth swims in the pool of knowledge, all while the father tries to pull her out, and both acts are labelled as forbidden. She becomes the catalytic chaos phase, when war and stagnation overgrow the garden, if you get what I mean. The Killick say sometimes war grows too powerful, and that's when Abeloth comes to destroy the old order and make room for a new one. And the font and the pool, which I will get into deeper in another video, they're not necessarily dark and light. Ben says to Vistara, it's called the pool of knowledge. Even if she survived, the experience would change it into something he had no chance of pulling back into the light. So the father wouldn't have been able to pull her back into the light after what she learned at the pool of knowledge. So that's not, even though that's kind of like the daughter as well, that is not inherently light side. And Ben says some knowledge destroys. In other words, the font and pool are amplifiers that rewrite posture. So they rewrite the posture. Bathing there without clarity tilts you towards the very overreach that made Abeloth what she was. So in Mortis terms, think of the father as the living governor of the current, the balance. So the balance of the current, with the daughter and the son expressing creation, compassion and destruction and ambition as contained polarities. So that's how they express those contained polarities, through the son and the daughter. That's how they're expressed. And so the Killick record mirrors this. The father shielding the children from a transformed Abeloth who has stepped outside of his governance, which of course the son and daughter later do in the Clone Wars era. But Abeloth isn't simply the dark side like the sun is. She's the phase transition that erupts when someone usurps the celestial function and turns the current. And that's why the Killicks link her imprisonments and centerpoint scale interventions to the ones they need their guidance to bind her. And so she's in no way the one's superior, she's their problem. She's their kind of negative. The Killicks frame her as a sort of counterpart to the father. So, you got the bringer of chaos versus the keeper of balance. She's like a cyclical disruptor who becomes dangerous when chaos grows too strong. That's not more powerful than the children. It's a different function in the cosmology altogether, really. And so the ones can't kill her, so they imprison her. And the Killick account says that the son and daughter would periodically form a pact to stop Abeloth's rampages, and then guide Thorut's hive to help him imprison her. And that's the last successful resolution. Not a duel where she wins, but a lock that the family forges, and it's those locks, of course, that get broken down and that gets tipped over the edge by someone eventually usurping the sort of power of the Celestials in that sense. And so people mistake it. She's not necessarily part of the natural order like the dark side. You know, the father says destruction replaced by creation. He's talking about the daughter, the light, and the son, the dark. She's not just destruction. She's not a natural part of the river. She's not a natural flow of the river. She is outside of that. She's a side effect of what happens when someone breaks outside of that. So that's the main sort of difference between the sun being just destruction and Abeloth being, of course, chaos. They say you're the one who set Abeloth free when you change the future. And Raynar says, but the future is always in motion. And the Killiks say the motion within the river is not the same as turning the river. Riding the flow to a new bank is ordinary fate working, whereas altering the riverbed is changing the functions of nature. It's changing the functions, the celestial functions of the Force. So Abeloth is the eruption that follows the usurpation of celestial governance. So it's when someone turns the current. She's not a routine dark entity, but chaos as a system correction phase that raises overgrown orders, basically. And so she is freed not by normal choice within fate, but when someone alters the Force's course at a level the Ones used to regulate, which obviously becomes easier to do post One's death. But her own history is a cautionary glyph. Fontainpool change the user, reach beyond the rightful grasp, and you step outside the Father's containment, becoming the bringer of chaos. So she represents that risk beyond the rightful grasp. Taking what you can't have, getting what you can't have. And of course that entirely mirrors Jason, who set her free because he wanted to change the fate in the vision. That, of course, being his daughter, Alana. So the Ones and the Killiks and Centerpoint Station did it before. Last time that the locks, the walls of the riverbed were broken, the locks that kept her in were broken. It was the Ones and the Killiks and Centerpoint. And Luke's era could only stop a manifest cycle and reimpose constraints, because full annihilation isn't on the table. It's not even one of the options. So they have to just kind of put her back where she was and kind of set the current back to normal. And even that's framed as a big what if, but they never actually conclude this within the Fate of the Jedi or the Crucible series. It actually continues on into Legacy and the Legacy comics. And I'll get more into this in another video, but that links into Crate and Cade. But yeah, even in Crucible, Luke pivots the Order towards more like celestial Mortis sort of remedies, because they know they established that Abeloth is still out there, that she's still alive. So he sends all these Jedi, the Quest Knights, out to try and get Mortis, information about Mortis, to try and find Mortis or to find the dagger, so they can kill Abeloth and end it for good. But yeah, that all gets into the Legacy comics and Legacy War and all that stuff, and it never actually gets fully concluded before, Disney bought Star Wars, so that kind of sucks. So you have the Father, the system, and then within the system you have the dualities within the system, which is light and dark, son and daughter. And so obviously the daughter and the son, they're opposites, but they're dualities within the system. And then there's the duality outside of the system, which is between the Father and Abeloth. So that's how Abeloth, also known as the mother of Mortis, fits into that sort of whole Mortis framework set up there in the Clone Wars. So yeah. But yeah, I hope you learned something about Abeloth anyway. I will be going more into the current, into Darth Caedus, into, how Cade Skywalker, how this overlaps into his time, how Crate fits into all this. And of course other eras as well, but I am going to start branching out into Legacy, because we've done a lot of the prequel era at the moment. We've done a lot of the original trilogy, so now we're going to start doing a little bit of Legacy and diving into some of those other eras. So if you enjoyed, leave a like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in a bit. Also, I've got a bunch of other videos cooking as well. For some reason I started like 5 different videos and recorded all the voice for every single one of them. and then haven't fucking made the video yet, so I need to get around to doing that. But there's more stuff on the way. That's why I've been a while making stuff, as I've made about 10 videos and just haven't finished any of them. So that'll be sorted soon, and yeah, we'll keep getting them vids out. But yeah, bye.